A single dad stopped on the side of the road to fix a stranded woman's broken car, not knowing she was actually the blind date he had been avoiding all evening. What started as an awkward roadside rescue slowly turned into a night of secrets, fear, honesty, and a second chance. Neither of them expected. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Reese Calder had promised himself he would not turn the truck around. Not because he wanted to go on the date. He didn't. His sister had arranged it after months of telling him he was too young to live like an old man, too guarded to be happy, and too scared to admit he missed having someone beside him at the dinner table. Reese called it being responsible. His sister called it hiding. So that Friday evening, with his 8-year-old daughter staying overnight at her aunt's house, Reese drove toward a small restaurant outside Ashford, Connecticut. Wearing the only clean jacket he owned and a shirt he had ironed twice, he felt ridiculous. Like a man pretending he still knew how to talk to a woman without checking homework, packing lunches, or calculating whether the water heater could last another winter. Then he saw her. A woman in a burgundy dress stood beside an old green coupe on the shoulder of the highway, one hand gripping a black handbag, the other pressed tight around her phone. Cars passed too fast. Wind dragged her hair across her face. The hood was up, and the look in her eyes told Reese she had already tried to act calm and failed. He slowed down. Then he kept driving. For 3 seconds, he hated himself. On the 4th, he pulled onto the shoulder, reversed carefully, and stepped out. The woman watched him approach with the kind of caution that came from experience, not rudeness. Reese kept his hands visible, his voice low. "Car trouble?" She let out a nervous breath. "That obvious?" "Only because the hood isn't usually decorative." A faint smile appeared and disappeared. It started making this awful noise. Then the steering got stiff. "I barely got it off the road." Reese looked inside the engine bay. "You did the right thing, stopping. I was on my way somewhere." "So was I." He did not say more. He just removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and leaned in. The engine was hot, the belt loose, and one hose was close to giving up. It wasn't a perfect fix. It was a get her safely off the highway fix. The woman stood beside him, trying not to stare as he worked. There was dirt on his collar, a thin scar near his jaw, and tiredness in his face that did not make him look weak. It made him look real. "I'm Sienna Vale," she said. Reese called her. "You always rescue strangers before dinner?" "Only when their car looks more nervous than they do." This time, she smiled properly. For a moment, the tension softened. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. Reese noticed. "Bad news?" "My friend asking if I'm almost there." She paused. "She set me up on this blind date." Reese almost laughed. "That makes 2 of us." Sienna looked at him. "You too?" "Yeah. My sister decided my life needed fixing." "And do you?" He tightened a clamp and avoided her eyes. "My car?" "Sometimes." "My life?" "Depends who's asking." There was something in his answer that made Sienna quiet, not offended, just listening. Reese finished the temporary repair and stepped back. "Try it now." She turned the key. The engine coughed, struggled, then settled into a rough but steady idle. Sienna's face lit with relief. "You actually fixed it. Enough to get you to town. Not enough to ignore it tomorrow." She looked at his scratched hand. "You got hurt helping me." "It's nothing." "No, it isn't." Her voice softened. "People say that when they're used to nobody noticing." Reese looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time that evening, he forgot he was late. Neither of them knew the restaurant waiting ahead had only one reservation left under 2 names. Reese Calder and Sienna Vale. Reese stared at Sienna for a second too long. The engine was still rumbling between them, rough but alive, while the evening wind moved through the roadside grass. Sienna had one hand on the open car door, but she wasn't getting in yet. Something about the way she looked at him made the whole moment feel different now. Not romantic exactly, Not yet, but strangely honest. You said your sister set you up? Sienna asked. Reese wiped his hand on an old rag from his truck. Yeah, she thinks I've forgotten how to live. And have you? He gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Depends how dramatic you want the answer to be. Sienna looked down at his hand, where the scrape had started bleeding again near his knuckle. I think I'd rather have the real answer. That caught him off guard. Most people didn't ask Reese for the real answer. They liked the useful version of him, the mechanic, the reliable neighbor, the dad who showed up early and never complained. The man who could fix a door, a sink, a flat tire, a bad battery, and still smile like he wasn't tired. But Sienna had noticed the part he usually hid. Reese looked away first. I've got a daughter, he said. Elsie. She's 8. I don't make decisions the same way other people do. Sienna's face softened. That's not a bad thing. No. But it makes dating feel like a job interview where someone else's heart is also at risk. For a moment, Sienna didn't answer. Then she said, That might be the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a long time. A car rushed past, shaking the air around them. Reese stepped closer to the roadside of her car without thinking, placing himself between her and the traffic. Sienna noticed. You do that naturally? She asked. Do what? Put yourself in the harder place. He shrugged. Habit. But the truth was heavier than that. He had been living like that for years. Sienna's phone buzzed again. This time she didn't check it right away. You should go, Reese said. Your date's probably waiting. So is yours. Reese smiled faintly. Mine's probably already disappointed. Maybe mine too. They stood there with the joke hanging between them, both too aware of how strange the conversation had become. Finally, Sienna checked her phone. Her expression shifted. Reese saw it immediately. What happened? She hesitated. My friend just sent me the name of the restaurant again. Okay. And the reservation. Reese waited. Sienna slowly lifted her eyes. It says Calder and Vale. The wind seemed to quiet for half a second. Reese blinked once. You're joking. I'm really not. He took his phone out, opened his sister's message, and there it was. Reservation. Calder, Vale. Don't run. Reese looked at Sienna. Sienna looked at him. Neither of them laughed at first. Then she covered her mouth, half shocked, half embarrassed. So I made my blind date fix my car before dinner? And I almost drove past my blind date. That's worse. It is, he admitted. The humor faded slowly, leaving something warmer underneath. Sienna glanced at the old green coupe. This car belonged to my father. Reese's expression changed. He passed last year, she continued. I keep telling myself I'm fine. Then the car breaks down and suddenly I'm standing on the highway feeling like I'm losing him all over again. Reese didn't rush to comfort her. He didn't say the easy thing. He just listened. That made Sienna's eyes shine more than any speech could have. My wife left when Elsie was little, Reese said quietly. Different kind of loss. But I know what it's like to keep something running because stopping would hurt too much. Sienna nodded, breathing carefully. The moment became too real for the side of a highway. Reese closed the hood gently. You can drive it, but slowly. I'll follow you to the restaurant. If it acts up again, pull over. You don't have to. I know. That answer stayed with her. A few minutes later, Sienna pulled onto the road with Reese behind her, his truck headlights steady in her mirror. She found herself watching them more than the road, not because she was scared, but because for the first time that night, she didn't feel alone. When they reached the restaurant, rain had begun tapping softly against the windshield. Sienna parked. Reese parked beside her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sienna stepped out and looked across the space between their cars. So, she said, nervous smile returning, do we still go inside? Reese looked at the restaurant, then at her. I think after all that, he said, running now would be embarrassing. Sienna smiled, but as they walked toward the entrance, her car gave one last sharp hiss behind them. Reese turned. Sienna's face fell. And the night that was supposed to be simple suddenly became something neither of them could ignore. Reese stopped before his hand reached the restaurant door. Behind them, Sienna's old green coupe sat under the parking lot light, with a thin trail of steam rising from beneath the hood. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was enough to make Sienna's shoulders drop like the car had spoken the one thing she was afraid to hear. Not tonight. Not again. She turned back slowly. I thought it was fixed. Reese looked at the steam, then at her face. It was fixed enough to get you here. That sounds like something people say right before bad news. It's not bad news. He paused. It's honest news. Sienna gave a tired laugh, but her eyes were glassy now. I'm sorry. You came here for dinner, not roadside repair part 2. Reese stepped off the curb and walked back toward the car. Dinner can wait. You don't have to keep rescuing me. I'm not rescuing you. He glanced at her gently. I'm staying. That one word changed the air between them. Sienna followed him to the car, holding her phone light while he opened the hood again. Rain began to fall in soft, uneven drops, spotting his shirt and darkening the pavement. He leaned in, careful and focused, while she stood beside him instead of behind him this time. What do you need? She asked. Reese looked at her. Most people stepped back when things got inconvenient. They watched from a distance. They apologized. They waited for him to carry the weight. But Sienna didn't move away. Hold the light right there, he said. She did. The repair took longer this time. The hose needed a tighter temporary seal, and the old clamp had shifted again. Reese worked slowly, his knuckles scraped, his sleeves wet, his breath controlled. Sienna watched him with the kind of quiet attention that made him feel seen, not inspected. You're very calm, she said. I'm not always. What happens when you're not? He smiled faintly. I clean the kitchen at midnight and pretend it counts as emotional processing. That made her laugh, a real one this time. Then the laugh faded into something softer. My father used to fix this car in our driveway, she said. He'd tell me every strange noise had a story. I used to think he was just making excuses for an old engine. Reese tightened the clamp. Maybe he was teaching you to listen. Sienna's lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. A few minutes later, the engine started again. Not perfect, not smooth, but alive. Sienna looked at the car, then at Reese. You just saved the date twice. No, he said, closing the hood. Your car just made sure we skipped the fake part. Inside the restaurant, they didn't talk like strangers. They talked like two people who had already stood in the rain together. Reese told her about Elsie, about the way his daughter left sticky notes on the fridge, reminding him to buy cereal, about how she still slept with a nightlight but acted offended if anyone mentioned it. Sienna listened with warmth, not pity. Then Sienna told him about her father, about the old coupe, about a house that felt too quiet after he was gone, and about how everyone around her wanted her to move on because grief made them uncomfortable. Reese didn't try to fix that. He only said, some things don't need to be moved on from. Sometimes they just need somewhere softer to live. Sienna looked down at the table for a long moment. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. You're dangerous, she said softly. Reese raised an eyebrow. Me? You make honesty feel safe. He didn't know what to do with that, so he took a sip of water and tried not to look as affected as he felt. By the time dinner ended, the rain had stopped. The parking lot shone under the lights, and the old coupe waited quietly, like it had finally made its point. Reese followed Sienna home anyway, not because she was helpless, because care, when it was real, did not disappear once the awkward part was over. At her driveway, Sienna stepped out and looked back at him. The porch light glowed behind her, warm and steady. I don't want to rush anything, she said. I know you have Elsie. I know your life isn't simple. Reese nodded. It isn't. But I'd like to see you again, she smiled gently. Maybe somewhere with less steam. Reese looked at the car. No promises? She seems committed to drama. Sienna laughed, and the sound stayed with him. Coffee? He asked. Saturday morning? Coffee's dangerous, she reminded him. Maybe, he said, but I'm starting to think some dangerous things are worth it. He drove home with grease on his cuffs, rainwater on his jacket, and something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope. The next morning, Elsie noticed immediately. She sat at the kitchen table, spoon halfway to her mouth, studying him like a tiny detective. You're smiling weird. Reese poured her orange juice. I'm smiling normal. No, that's a date smile. He nearly dropped the carton. You don't know what a date smile is. I watch movies. Reese laughed under his breath and sat across from her. Elsie pointed at his scraped knuckle. Did she like you? Reese thought about Sienna standing in the rain, holding the light steady. I think, he said, she liked that I stopped. Elsie nodded with serious wisdom. Stopping is important. Reese looked out the window as morning sunlight touched the quiet street. For years, he had believed love meant risking too much. But now he wondered if the real risk was never pulling over at all.